They demanded my lake house like I owed them everything. So I gave them a welcome they'll never forget. The day my parents showed up at my lake house, with suitcases in their hands and entitlement in their eyes, I realized something painful. They didn't come to visit me. They came to claim me. I was standing on the wooden deck, watching the sun melt into the lake, when I heard their car crunch over the gravel driveway. My heart didn't race with excitement. It tightened. Because when my parents arrived unannounced, it never meant love. It meant demands. My mother stepped out first, adjusting her sunglasses like she owned the place already. My father followed, scanning the house slowly, nodding as if inspecting a property he had purchased. "So this is it?" my father said, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "Not bad. Not bad. 3 years of overtime. 3 years of skipped vacations. 3 years of ramen noodles and sleepless nights after my divorce. 3 years of saving every single dollar after they refused to help me when I had nowhere to go. And it was not bad." I forced a polite smile. "You could have called." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "We're your parents. Why would we need permission?" There it was. The sentence that had controlled my entire childhood. Why would we need permission? Growing up, nothing was mine. Not my opinions. Not my privacy. Not even my dreams. If I succeeded, it was because of them. If I failed, it was my fault. When I got my first job at 18, my father managed my salary. When I bought my first car, they reminded me whose roof I lived under. When I got married, they criticized every detail. And when my marriage collapsed, they told me it was because I didn't listen to them. The night my ex-wife left, I called my mother crying. She sighed and said, "You made your bed." I slept in my car for 2 weeks after that. They never knew. Or maybe they did. They just didn't care. So when I finally saved enough to buy this lake house, far away from the noise and the judgment, I didn't tell them until after I signed the papers. It was the first thing in my life that was truly mine. And now they were standing on my driveway with luggage. "We've decided," my father said as he walked past me toward the front door, "that it's better for everyone if we move here." I blinked. "Move here?" "Yes." My mother chimed in, already stepping inside. "Your father's retirement is coming. The city is stressful. This place is peaceful. And honestly, you owe us." There it was again. You owe us. For being born. For breathing. For existing. I closed the door slowly behind us, my heart pounding. "I never agreed to that." My father set his suitcase down in the living room like he was marking territory. "We sacrificed our lives for you. The least you can do is share what you built." Share. They didn't mean share. They meant take. I looked around my living room. The fireplace I installed myself, the couch I assembled alone. The framed photo of the lake at sunrise, that I took the first morning I woke up here feeling free. This house wasn't just wood and glass. It was survival. And they were trying to rewrite the story again. That night, I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't remind them how they refused to help me when I had nothing. Instead, I smiled calmly and said, "Of course." "You're welcome to stay?" My mother looked satisfied. My father nodded proudly, as if he had won something. But what they didn't know was that I had already prepared a welcome they would never forget. You see, when I bought this lake house, I made sure of something important. My name was the only one on the deed. And I had learned something else over the years. Boundaries are not announced with anger. They are enforced with action. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. I made coffee and sat by the window watching the lake. I let myself feel everything: anger, sadness, disappointment, even guilt. Because no matter how much someone hurts you, cutting emotional ties with your parents feels like cutting off your own skin. But peace costs something. I was finally willing to pay the price. At 9 a.m., my father walked into the kitchen. "We were thinking," he said casually, "you should transfer the property to my name. It makes tax things easier." I almost laughed. Transfer the property. After everything. "I'll think about it," I replied quietly. At noon, I made a phone call. At 2 p.m., a car pulled into the driveway. My parents were sitting on the deck when the man stepped out in a suit, holding a folder. My mother frowned. Who is that? I walked outside calmly. That's the lawyer. My father's face tightened. What lawyer? The one who's helping me finalize something important. We all sat down at the outdoor table. The lake shimmered behind us, peaceful and still. The lawyer opened the folder. Mr. Carter, he said, looking at me. As requested, I've prepared the documents. My father looked confused. Documents for what? I took a deep breath. For the sale. Silence. My mother blinked. Sale of what? The Lakehouse. My father stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the wood. What are you talking about? I met his eyes steadily for the first time in my life without fear. I put the house on the market last week. My mother's voice cracked. You can't be serious. I am. But we just moved in. You moved yourselves in. My father's face turned red. You're doing this to punish us. No, I said softly. I'm doing this to protect myself. The truth was, I had been thinking about selling even before they arrived. Not because I didn't love this place, but because I refused to let them attach their control to my sanctuary. They thought moving in would trap me emotionally again. Instead, it freed me completely. You're ungrateful, my father hissed. I nodded slowly. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired. The lawyer cleared his throat gently. The buyer is offering above asking price. Closing is scheduled in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Where will we go? I swallowed. That question hit deeper than I expected. But then I remembered the night I slept in my car. And no one asked me that. You'll go back to your house in the city, I said quietly. The one you still own. My father opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Because it was true. They weren't homeless. They just wanted control. The next 2 weeks were tense and quiet. They tried guilt. They tried anger. They tried reminding me of every school fee they paid, every birthday cake they bought. I listened. But I didn't bend. On the final morning before closing, I woke up early again. I walked down to the lake and let the cold water touch my feet. I felt grief. This house had healed me. But healing isn't about walls. It's about boundaries. When I walked back up, my parents were loading their suitcases into their car. My mother looked older somehow. Smaller. Are you happy now? She asked softly. I thought about it carefully. No, I said. But I'm peaceful. There's a difference. They drove away without saying goodbye. I watched the dust settle on the driveway. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a scared little boy trying to earn approval. I felt like a man who chose himself. The sale went through smoothly. I made enough profit to start over somewhere new. Somewhere smaller. Somewhere even quieter. A few months later, I bought a modest cabin further north. I didn't tell anyone. No announcements. No photos online. Just silence. Sometimes people think revenge has to be loud, but the most powerful kind is quiet growth. My parents still call occasionally. Their tone is different now. Less demanding. More careful. Because they finally understand something. I am not their property. And my success is not their retirement plan. The greatest welcome I prepared for them wasn't humiliation. It was a mirror. A mirror that showed them I was no longer the child they could command. And as I sit here now, watching a different lake under a different sky, I realize something important. You can love your parents. You can respect them. But you do not have to surrender your peace to prove it. Sometimes the bravest thing you will ever do is close the door gently and walk toward your own life. And trust that choosing yourself is not selfish. It's survival. For a while, I thought that was the end of the story. A clean break. A quiet victory. A new beginning in a smaller cabin, where no one knew my name, and no one felt entitled to my life. But healing is not a straight road. It curves back sometimes. It tests you. It asks, are you really free, or just hiding? 6 months after the Lakehouse sold, I received a letter. Not a text. Not a call. A letter. My mother's handwriting was shaky, uneven. I recognized it immediately. It used to sign my report cards, when I was too afraid to show my father a bad grade. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Inside, there were only a few lines. Your father had a mild heart attack. He is stable. He keeps asking for you. That was it. No apology. No warmth, just information. And yet my chest felt heavy. Memories flooded in. My father teaching me how to ride a bike. His hand steadying the seat before letting go. The rare times he smiled when I scored a goal in school. The pride in his eyes when I graduated. Love was there once. It was just buried under control. I didn't go immediately. I told myself I needed time. I told myself I owed them nothing. But the truth was, I was scared. Not of them. Of becoming that small boy again. 3 days later, I found myself driving toward the city. The hospital hallway smelled like disinfectant and old regrets. When I walked into the room, my father looked fragile. Smaller than I remembered. Machines beeped softly beside him. His eyes opened slowly when he heard the door. For a moment, we just stared at each other. I expected anger. Instead, I saw something I had never seen before. Uncertainty. You came, he said quietly. Yes? My mother stood in the corner silent, not commanding, not criticizing, just tired. I pulled a chair beside the bed. I didn't know what to say. Years of tension don't disappear with one hospital visit. My father cleared his throat. I thought you wouldn't. I almost didn't. Honesty felt different now. Stronger. He nodded slowly. I suppose I earned that. The words surprised me. I had imagined this moment so many times in my head. In most versions, we argued. In some, I walked out dramatically. But real life is softer, more complicated. I was hard on you, he continued. His voice trembled slightly. I thought that's how you make a man strong. I swallowed. It made me strong. But it also made me lonely. Silence filled the room. My mother wiped her eyes quietly. I didn't know how to be any other way. He whispered. And in that moment, I saw him not as the giant who controlled my childhood, but as a flawed man who had probably been controlled by his own father. Pain travels through generations like an inheritance. Unless someone decides to stop it. I'm not here to fight, I said gently. But I need you to understand something. He looked at me carefully. I won't give up my life to earn your approval anymore. The words didn't shake. They didn't break. They simply existed. He closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, they were wet. I know, he said. That was the closest thing to acceptance I had ever received from him. I stayed for 2 hours. We didn't solve everything. We didn't suddenly become a perfect family. But something shifted. Not because they demanded less, but because I finally demanded more for myself. After he was discharged, I visited occasionally. Short visits. Clear boundaries. I never stayed overnight. I never discussed my finances. I never allowed conversations to turn into control. And each time they tested the old patterns, I gently stopped them. I'm not discussing that. That decision is mine. I understand your opinion, but I've chosen differently. At first, they resisted. Then they adjusted. Because when someone realizes they can no longer manipulate you, they either leave or learn. My father started asking about my work instead of criticizing it. My mother began telling stories instead of issuing instructions. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One evening, nearly a year after the Lakehouse incident, my father said something unexpected. You were right to sell it. I looked at him carefully. Why do you say that? He exhaled slowly. If you hadn't, I would have ruined it for you. The honesty stunned me. I didn't know how to let you have something that wasn't mine. He admitted. That sentence healed more than any apology could have. Because it was truth, and truth breaks chains. I realized then that the welcome I gave them at the Lakehouse wasn't cruel. It was necessary. It forced all of us to confront who we had become. Years later, when I look back at that day on the deck, the suitcases, the demands, the tension, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel gratitude. Because that was the day I stopped being their extension and started being myself. My cabin up north is still quiet. The lake there freezes in winter and sparkles in summer. I built a small dock with my own hands. Sometimes I sit at the edge and think about how close I was to losing myself again. Peace is fragile when you've never been taught how to protect it, but once you learn, you never unlearn. My parents are older now. Softer. Time humbles everyone. Our relationship exists within boundaries. And boundaries are not walls meant to punish. They are fences that protect love from turning into control. If there's one lesson my life taught me, it's this. You can honor where you came from without surrendering where you're going. You can forgive without forgetting. You can care without carrying someone else's expectations on your back. And sometimes, the most unforgettable welcome you give someone is showing them that you are no longer the person they can control. Because true freedom isn't loud. It's quiet. It's steady. It's standing on your own porch under your own sky, knowing that this life, finally, belongs to you. Years passed. Not in dramatic leaps, but in quiet, ordinary days. The kind of days I once used to overlook. Morning coffee by the water. The slow sound of wind through pine trees. Evenings where the only noise was the soft tapping of rain against the roof of my cabin. Peace stopped feeling temporary. It started feeling permanent. My father never fully returned to the man he was before the heart attack. Something in him had shifted that day in the hospital room. Mortality has a way of softening even the hardest voices. Our conversations grew simpler. Less about success, more about time. One winter afternoon, he called me unexpectedly. I was thinking about something, he said. His voice sounded older now, thinner. What about that bike? I smiled slightly. The one you let go of too early. He chuckled softly. No, the one I held onto too long. I didn't speak. I let him finish. When you were learning, I was so afraid you'd fall. So I kept holding the seat. Even when you were ready, you kept saying, Dad, let go. And I wouldn't. The memory was clear in my mind. I had been maybe 8 years old, wobbling down the sidewalk, frustrated that he wouldn't trust me. You finally let go, I said. Yes, he replied quietly. But I didn't realize I never really let go after that. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was understanding. I thought protecting you meant controlling you, he continued. I see now it only pushed you away. It wasn't a dramatic apology. It wasn't a speech filled with regret. But it was enough. Because growth doesn't always come wrapped in perfect words. Sometimes it comes in small admissions. That spring, my mother asked if she could visit the cabin. She didn't assume. She asked. That alone told me everything had changed. You can come for the weekend, I said. We'll keep it simple. When they arrived, there were no suitcases packed for permanence. Just 2 small bags. No inspections. No comments about the size. No subtle suggestions about renovations. My mother stood by the lake quietly and whispered, It's beautiful, not. It could be better. Not. You should have bought something bigger. Just beautiful. That evening, we sat around a small fire outside. The flames flickered gently, reflecting in the water. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was performing for them. I was just present. At one point, my father looked around and said, You built this? Yes. He nodded slowly. You did good. 3 simple words. You did good, as a child. I chased those words like oxygen. As a man, I no longer needed them. But hearing them still warmed something inside me. Later that night, after they went to sleep in the guest room, I sat alone on the porch. I thought about the Lakehouse again. About the confrontation. About the lawyer. About the way my voice didn't shake when I said I was selling it. That moment wasn't just about property. It was the moment I broke a pattern that had existed long before I was born. Control. Guilt. Obligation disguised as love. I didn't break it with anger. I broke it with calm action. And because of that, something unexpected happened. It didn't just change me. It changed them too. Pain can travel through generations. But so can courage. A year later, my father's health declined again. This time it was quieter, slower. I visited more often. Not out of guilt, but choice. There's a difference. One evening, sitting beside his bed at home, he looked at me and said, "I used to think respect meant obedience." I listened. "I know now respect is giving someone space to be who they are." I squeezed his hand gently. He passed away 2 weeks later. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't filled with last-minute confessions. It was peaceful. And that peace mattered. At the funeral, relatives whispered about how devoted I was. How I stepped up, in the end. They didn't know the real story. They didn't know about the Lakehouse. About the boundaries. About the years of tension. But I did. And my mother did. After everyone left, she sat beside me quietly. "You changed him," she said softly. I shook my head. "No, I changed me." She looked at me for a long moment. "I wish I had learned earlier," she whispered. "It's not too late," I replied. Grief didn't feel heavy. It felt honest. Because there were no unfinished battles left between us. No words trapped behind pride. Just two imperfect people who finally understood each other. Now, when I sit by the lake at my cabin, I sometimes think about that first house. The one I sold. Some people might still say I overreacted. That I should have just shared it. That family is everything. But family without boundaries becomes a cage. And love without respect becomes control. If I had given in that day, I would have lost more than a house. I would have lost myself. Instead, I gave them something unforgettable. Not humiliation. Not revenge. But a line they could not cross. And because of that line, we were finally able to meet each other as adults. Not as owner and possession. Not as commander and child. But as human beings. If you're listening to this, and you feel that tightness in your chest when someone says, "Ois," remember this. Gratitude is not slavery. Love is not surrender. And choosing peace does not make you selfish. It makes you free. The lake in front of me is still tonight. The sky is wide. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel like I'm waiting for someone to approve of who I am. I already know. And that quiet certainty is the greatest home I ever built.